Let me begin just by saying that I think there are a number of questions which need to be asked and answered, many of which, in my view, have yet to be asked and answered. And they are as follows. Is there really a need? Is the approach that is being suggested going to be effective? Are there other alternatives? To the extent that there is an approach underway and or suggested for the future, do we know that it will be safe? To the extent that there are plans for the future, are there going to be ways for members of the public to be heard if there are adverse consequences which need to be addressed? Those are some of the questions that I want to make sure we address during today's testimony and that I hope the public will speak to as well when that time comes. So why don't I go immediately then to Senator Migden, if I may, and ask if she has any opening comments that will help frame the discussion today. Then we'll go to Mr. Huffman, and then we'll go immediately to our public today.
Thank you very much, and I want to just say we appreciate Senator Simitian coming to chambers, and we again are going to keep exploring this issue, and it was our privilege to be here weeks ago. I want to welcome the Secretary. Secretary Carol is here again today with us, and the Secretary of Agriculture for the state of California, and we appreciate his hands-on involvement in this issue. And I think the chairman expressed it. We want to know if it's safe, if it works, what the exposure is going to be, if that has been determined before. At some point, Mr. Secretary, there are folks that say it wasn't the worst infestation in New Zealand, that frankly there was a lot made of that. What we know about the health consequences of the people that have been sprayed in the Santa Cruz area and Monterey area. And just to look people on this issue of control rather than eradication. And what the government typically does is try and control a pest. And when it feels it hasn't done that, it has to spray or eradicate, at least according to experts. And how do we go from an introduction past a control into an eradication? And we very much want to make sense out of the federal and the state plans vis-a-vis the infestation of this moth. We are not here to tread lightly on the agricultural concerns. There's a $7 billion we make as a state, but we are here in a very forthright manner, and all counties that have been included in the aerial spraying proposed plan have expressed great public outcry. We think it sounds like very legitimate reasons, and we want to just continue to pursue questions that we have to determine if this absolutely is a course of action, or what could be done to try and eradicate a pet without exposing humans to this pesticide. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mr. Huffman, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank you for having this oversight hearing and for coming to Marin County. Thank you, Senator Migden, for being so vigilant on this issue. It was almost a month ago to this day that I held a hearing as chair of the Assembly's Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee here in this chamber to begin asking the very good questions, Senator Simitian, which you just outlined for us. In the period that has passed since then, we have not received complete satisfactory answers to those questions, in my opinion. In fact, new questions have arisen, in part due to some research and expert opinions from UC scientists calling into question the very premise of the eradication program, and also raising questions about whether aerial spraying will be effective in the stated goal of eradication. We have yet to hear, in my opinion, satisfactory answers regarding the human health complaints that were made in Santa Cruz and Monterey. We have yet to hear satisfactory answers about the chemical cocktail that is proposed for spraying this summer right here in Marin County, the latest status, what we can expect in terms of ingredients, and we've yet to hear satisfactory answers about alternatives to aerial spraying. So I want to thank you, Chairman Simitian and Senator Migden, for continuing the oversight process which we began. Unfortunately, I feel like in the weeks that have passed since the February 14th hearing, we have crossed a threshold of credibility with this eradication program, such that I am requesting Secretary Kawamura that you postpone the plan to spray this fall.
The expression of exuberance for the afternoon. And let me tell you why. We're under some time constraints, and I want to make sure that the time is used to hear from folks without regard to what their point of view on the issue is. The other thing I want to ask you to do in terms of holding back on either boos, hisses, applause, and any of that, is that it can be intimidating for people who want to speak. And I know it doesn't always seem that way, but it's tough sometimes for people that we're used to talking too much. That's what we get paid to do up here. But for folks from the community, it can be tough. So if you just hold off on any demonstrations of either support or opposition, I would appreciate it. I know the Sergeant Arms would appreciate it, and it will create a public venue and dialogue within this group. So that being said, Mr. Huffman, anything else before we go further?
Just very quickly, one of the reasons that I think it is appropriate, and again, I'm not saying get rid of your eradication program. I think we need to continue looking at the very legitimate issues that are driving your efforts, and we need to continue exploring it together to find a solution that works for the economy, for the environment, and for our public health. But the one thing I have learned that is very compelling to me is that this pest moves a few hundred feet in its lifetime of a few months. And so putting the proposed spraying plan on hold for a little while to allow us the time to do this issue justice and to flesh out alternatives and to look at the serious questions that have been raised, to me, presents no major risk that this pest will get out of control. We can work with that time frame. And so that is my request. I thank everyone for being here, and again, thank you, Mr. Chair, for having us.
Thank you, sir, for being here. And Ms. Migden, anything else before
just
we move on?
Supervisor Susan Adams is here in chamber joining us, and if you would just allow me, and the supervisor, are these folks here, all of them? You sure they're here now? Okay, just let me know who really is.
Okay.
And we're happy to have Supervisor Adams. Thank you. Let's begin.
Thank you, Supervisor, and let's begin. And let's go first to A.G. Kawamura, Secretary, and Dr. Bob Dow, Program Director from the Department of Food and Agriculture. Gentlemen.
This one's on. Good afternoon, Chairman SIMITIAN, Senator Migden, and Assemblymember Huffman. Thank you for having us here today. Again, in this area, we've been doing a lot of town halls, public outreaches throughout the general area over the last 6 months in talking about the light brown apple moth and the eradication process that we have in motion to eradicate this pest from the state of California. We continue to realize that there are a lot of first-time people that are learning about the moth, that are hearing different kinds of information. They are hearing tremendous amounts of misinformation as far as we can see, but at the same time, we're here then to give you some of those answers that were just referenced by both Assemblymember Huffman and Senator Migden. I appreciate the chance that I've had to be able to sit with you in your offices and talk to you about why this pest is a threat to California, to California's environment and its food supply. And I'd like to then be able to establish, at least today, some of the very important reasons behind why eradication of any invasive pests is something that we do on a regular basis. And what I'll do first is just give you about 3-4 minutes more of a description of what our Department of Agriculture has done and does on a regular basis. Then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Bob Dow, who's our project director. The previous eradications, and one that might come to mind in this area that had an aerial application attached to it, was here in Nevada. We had an Asian gypsy moth in 2001, and we were forced to spray with an aerial application with resistance from the public, a BT, a bacillus organism that helped shut down that population. If that Asian gypsy moth had established here in the forest canopy of this state, in this area, you would certainly know about it, because I would ask anybody that's listening, if they don't understand what some invasive species can do, is go online, take a look at Asian gypsy moths, and look at the damage on the East Coast, the thousands of acres that are defoliated by a very tough moth. Now, light brown apple moth is a different moth than the Asian gypsy moth. It doesn't fly 4 miles a day. The female Asian gypsy moth flies 4 miles a day. As Assemblymember Huffman mentioned, this moth in the course of a lifetime might fly about 100 meters. One of the challenges we have in our state, however, is the movement of products, whether they're nursery products, whether they're people moving from place to place with their shrubs and their plants as they move. And as we move these kinds of invasives from place to place, whether it's from our state or out of our state into Arizona, into Nevada, across the coast, this is how many of the invasives spread. And so common plant pests like a cabbage butterfly, that white butterfly you see flying around, common pests like the garden snail, the brown garden snail, many different pests. Many of you on the East Coast would know what a Japanese beetle is. And we've had several eradications of Japanese beetle here in our state over the course of time. And they're very tough insects. They're pests that are absolutely known to be a challenge to both your environment, your food supply, and in some cases other pests are challenges to public health. Our department over the last just 30 years has done hundreds of eradications, and since the beginning of the California Environmental Quality Act, every eradication that we've had under CEQA has had a report, an environmental impact report that has been submitted alongside with it. Many times because of the nature of an eradication, the time frame doesn't allow you to wait to do an EIR first and then do your eradication. The very nature of an eradication is what drives an emergency kind of crisis where it's moving and you don't have the luxury to let it sit and move in the environment or in throughout the state. And that's a very important thing. Senator Migden had mentioned 3 things. Introduction of a disease or a pest or an insect into our state is the first thing that we want to try not to let happen. We call that pest exclusion. We want to keep these things out. And I ask this regularly in every meeting I've been to. If your committee, if this crowd behind me, if you guys could at least, if you don't like the eradication we're doing, we can talk and we can argue about that. That's what we're here today about. But the one thing you can do is you can write a letter and you can tell our congressional delegates and our senators that we need to tighten up the international ports of entry where a lot of these pests are coming through. This is the first time in North America that the Light Brown Apple Moth is here on this continent, that with an established population. And that's with a lot of bug enthusiasts, entomologists looking for it, expecting it to show up eventually, and sure enough, here it is in this area. So there's 48 other contiguous states that don't have it, 2 nations, and 40-something other counties in our state that do not have this moth. The introduction then is the most critical stage. If we could keep these things out in the first place, we certainly wouldn't have to go into an eradication mode. If the introduction, we can find it early enough, we certainly, if we can find it early enough, and I'll repeat that, we don't have to do an aerial application because we should be able to surround it and use the tools that we have to eradicate it and eradicate it quickly. And we do that. This last year we had 14 different eradications going on in the state for a multitude of different invasives, and that was a busy year last year. Part of the reason is because more and more things are coming in through our borders. A lot of it is carelessness by tourists that are bringing fruits and other pets or wood products that they want to smuggle in and they don't declare at the borders. Others are people are ordering things online because they can get exotic plants and exotic insects. Some of them are bringing seeds and spices and are sneaking those through too. That has got to stop because that's what brings us to a committee meeting like this. And I'm very serious about it because it's one of the biggest challenges we have to our environment and one of the biggest challenges we have to our food supply and by nature of that also our economy, because ultimately the cost of food is driven up when many of these pests make it tough for us to get a crop out. Now, in addition to that, then, if you can't eradicate it, then you go into control.
Let me just allow for a quick question here from Senator Migden.
You and I did have a very productive conversation where you explained this multi-tiered approach and the failure of the feds to control has led to your belief that we have to move from finding out something exists past control into eradication, a very drastic step from an identification point. I want to know something about the proposed spraying because I had heard that there's something as if there's a 30-day spray and then a stop, and that has an effectiveness for 100 days and drift. Have there been other communities exposed to the type of aerial spraying you're suggesting now, which I'm led to believe is it even in excess of what's been done in the past in this country or other countries? And is that so? Can you just tell us the cycles and the days of exposure that you propose based upon the fact that we are in dire straits according to your representation?
Yes, let me answer that. As far as currently, I mentioned an Asian gypsy moth populations that are not eradicable on the East Coast. And regularly they are spraying with different tools, aerial applications, mostly over suburban areas, whether it's in Michigan, whether it's in Virginia, whether it's in Wisconsin, many of the different areas. And they are using pheromones, and they are also using BTs to try and control that insect. And so these aerial applications have gone on, but I'm going to also let Bob Dow discuss that in his remarks, because I think that's where we want to go right now. I wanted to just make sure and establish that this is not something new that our department is doing here in the state of California. We conduct eradications for pests all the time. This is a new tool that we have to use, which is a pheromone application trying to do an eradication, and that's important, I think, to establish. And so,
but is it even use of the pheromone, sir, more than it has been used? And I appreciate your differentiation. Mm-hmm. But am I incorrect? Am I incorrect? I have been led to believe that this would be unique in terms of the degree of exposure or the number of application.
Right.
And whether or not you think it's harmful or not, I just want to say, is that the case?
So
that there would be an expedited extra spraying plan than had been previously used, maybe to control, because you're on the eradication phase.
That's right. Let me go ahead and then have Dr. Dow give you that description.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, before Dr. Dow goes forward, I just want to go back to the question that Senator Migden asked to make sure I hear an answer. I think Senator Migden was asking whether or not this is, in effect, the most widespread application of pheromones by aerial spraying that has thus far occurred in addressing this issue, either in this state or elsewhere in the country. And is the answer to that question yes, no, or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, gypsy moth, they have a program called Spray Quickly Stop the Spread. They use aerial application of pheromone over places like Madison, Wisconsin, and Chicago, Illinois. The goal is to merely slow down the insect. It will simply continue to spread. They are using Gyp-Check. It's a pheromone material with, I believe, exactly the same carrier we were using out here in California. Because it is merely designed to slow the spread, they are in fact not spraying as often as we are. There is no chance of eradicating that organism. They will live with it forever. This is simply a stopgap measure to slow down the insect, slow down the defoliation, and will follow the insect. And on that, if we can dim the lights a little bit, if we've got a PowerPoint, someone can get these up to you all. These are some handouts which include the PowerPoint.
Thank you. We'll ask the Sergeant at Arms to assist us.
Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you, sir. You've heard a brief history about the Light Brown Apple Moth. It was confirmed in California in 2007. It's currently found in breeding in 9 different counties in the state of California. We conducted a survey for this insect in 2005. The USDA and CDFA had identified this as one of the number of pests of concern. We do periodically look for these pests. We can't look for everything. There's hundreds and hundreds of organisms out there that threaten the state. So periodically we come back and look for those insects, especially those for which we have traps. We conducted a survey in 2005. We found no light brown apple moths. The traps use a pheromone, and you've heard quite a bit about that. It's not a perfume. It attracts, it's used by the female to attract the males. The males are genetically hardwired to respond to the pheromone, the perfume. If they're physically able to fly, they will fly towards the trap. The trap was, as I say, we trapped statewide and nationwide in 2005. We found no insects. We came back in 2007 after the discovery of the insect and trapped some of the virtually identical sites as we trapped in 2005. We caught lots and lots of light brown apple moths. Based on that information when we talked with entomologists who are looking for moths, their pure joy in life is to get what's called a new state record. That is, they're the first one to find an insect. They haven't seen it. We don't see it in collections. We believe the insect has been here for several years, but not the 10, 30, 50-year estimates that some people have come up with. As you know, we convened USDA convened a technical working group of outside experts. These included people from the University of California, the USDA, Australia, New Zealand. They reviewed our situation, taking out several conclusions. One, we did not want to live with this moth. Or more accurately, we didn't want to live with the penalties associated with living with the moth, which down under include insecticide sprays. Two, that the infestation was small enough to be eradicated out of California. And three, the tools that were available or would be coming available should do the job.
And Dr. we have a bit of a challenge here in that for some of the folks who are here today, this will be new information. For some, it will be a repeat of information you've been kind enough to share before. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to show my age here and ask you to give us the Reader's Digest condensed version of this seminar, if you could. So you can still cover each topic, but if you can give us a sort of a bullet points rather than the more detailed presentation.
Chairman Simidian,
in fairness, though, sir, you had rolled over a few sets of questions. The
Right.
gentleman is a reiteration, a little bit of your remarks of what we've heard in chambers before.
Right.
I think we all know that about why you believe because of discovery of U.S. patterns, and maybe that should be addressed with the United States Immigration Department, but we can't address that.
Okay.
So what we want to know specifically now, and if you're punting it to your assistant, that's fine too, but why are you proposing this intense and by far the most comprehensive spraying right now proposed in California? Moreover, sir, can you tell us, Mr. Secretary, you said to be in the office that as you began to take other efforts and have twist ties and monitor the situation, it could be possible that there were findings that this moth was contained and that aerial spraying would not be necessary. So I'd rather address it. What do you need to see? Where did this happen before? How should we feel confident that we're going to be spraying more than anyone ever has been? We have not seen this outbreak in the United States of America. We're getting sketchy reports from New Zealand. That's a little remote to us as well. We appreciate that. So Dr. Tino, rather than the recitation, the 101 summary, we know that. These people know more than me out there. So can we just move to the crux for us in this give and take?
Let me answer to a few things. Earlier we had mentioned that aerial applications of pheromones have been occurring regularly throughout the United States for different kinds of pests.
It's not this intensity, sir.
200,000 acres in residential areas of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Virginia, and Wisconsin for Asian gypsy moth over the past 7 years has taken place. In our state, you might remember, most of us remember, we had a very bad infestation of Mediterranean fruit fly that led to a malathion spray many years ago. Driven by the negative consequences, and especially in the sense of non-targeted insects that were part of that kill, if you will, with the malathion spray. We have been asked by environmental groups, by organic groups, to move toward better tools over the years. The pheromone application represents the environmentally friendly, safest application of a material for eradication in the history of the eradications that we've been
Let me
doing.
just ask you, but is it not the case that you tend to spray every 30 or 90 days for a minimum of 3 years?
If we end up with material that can go every 90 days, currently we have in Santa Cruz and Monterey, we use a 30-day material, which would mean that we would want to spray every 30 days until we can see the populations collapse. We're currently looking at, down in New Zealand, we're studying a material that might be able to go.
Just a moment, because I apologize for interrupting. Folks, the only way everybody gets hurt is if everybody respects everybody's point of view, no matter how contrary to your own it may be. So I want to ask everybody to keep the noise level down, let the gentleman speak. When airtime comes, I assure you I will insist on the same courtesy for your point of view, whatever it may be. But I really do want to ask you to just keep it civil, and that way we'll get to hear from folks. And I can assure you that between Senator Migden and myself, the questions will be quite probing, and we'll pull this information out of the process today. And that being said, Mr. Secretary, I think the question Senator Migden asked earlier, if I can take a second effort at it, was that, you know, looking at every 30 to 90 days as a possibility. You indicated that if the product lasts 30 days, then you could be looking at every 30 days. Secretary Migden indicated that that could last for as long as 3 years. You indicated it could last for as, you know, as sort of as long until the problem was effectively addressed, to paraphrase you accurately, I hope. And my question is that in fact likely to be 3 years? Because I think one of the questions that we're going to try to get some answers to is how often, how much, and how long here.
The process of eradication it runs on a dynamic of understanding what's happening with the intruding pest in the environment. Certainly the trapping that we're doing now, as it's warming up here in springtime, will help guide us on whether or not, one, whether eradication is still feasible, two, whether maybe the populations are lowering down and maybe we are able to adjust the action plan and back away in certain areas from aerial spraying. Three, maybe the hatch is more extreme than we thought, which would then make us that much more concerned to move forward on our application. And so the answer to that is it's not a fixed science in terms of being able to tell how quickly we can eradicate this pest.
So the summary on that is it depends.
It does.
Yes.
It does.
Okay.
But it is driven by what we're finding in the environment.
That being said, is it possible, based on the experience in other places, that it could in fact take as long as 3 years?
Yes.
Okay. But your hope would be that we'd be more effective sooner rather than later, and that wouldn't be necessary in some places. Is that a fair statement?
It's always the case, but it's mostly driven by the biology of the pest. Some pests only cycle once a year, so what might be a 3-year cycle for one pest, they only reproduce once every 3 years, and we like to get to 3 different life cycles where we can see that something is firmly eradicated. Other pests like this reproduce regularly. We'll know quicker when we do have an eradication with this pest.
Now, just so the members of the Senate, but also members of the public can understand, so does that mean it's possible that in some places you would be talking about spraying every 30 days for as long as 3 years if that was what was necessary?
It's possible.
Okay. And does that then, going back to...
And it might be every 90 days if a new material comes.
Great. And then, does that then cause you any concern, that extended period of spraying and that larger cumulative amount of spraying? Or is it your view that, since you believe the product is safe, it doesn't really matter whether it's once a month for 3 years if the product is fundamentally safe? I just want to get your view into the record.
The product is fundamentally safe, but there's also other tools we'll be using alongside with this application to bring it together, including parasitic wasps, including other twist ties that you've heard about. So it's a eradication action plan that has many components to it, and that's what we were going to try and go through here.
Great, thank you. Now, Senator Migden, did I interrupt your train of thought? Okay, good. And then if we could, as they say, try and get to some of these other issues, but perhaps just touching the highlights here.
And for some of those tough questions too, I wanted to make sure to know that we also have here with us today from the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment is Dr. David Ting, a toxicologist. We have from Cal Fire, out of the Department of Resources, Tom Smith, who's a staff pathologist, and Bill Snyder from the Department of Director from Resource Management. And we also have from the Department of Pesticide Registration, Chris Reardon, and Dr. Jay Snyder, who is also a toxicologist, for some of those other questions. And these are some specialists that can help us with those answers that we're trying to give you.
Thank you. Why don't we ask Dr. Dow to try and...
Okay, reader's digest first.
Thank you.
We've divided the area into 3 levels of infestation: high, medium, and low. We have got a series of tools we'll be using, tailoring the tools to each of the infestations. Starting at the bottom with the small isolated infestations. These are very few moths. The infestations are isolated by at least 1.5 miles from any other infestation. We're able to use twist ties. These are like the twist ties you get at the grocery store, a little bit bigger. We put them on at a rate of 250 per acre, 30 to 40 per property. Saturate the area with a pheromone. The moths can't find each other, population crashes. We've used this tool successfully on 3 isolated infestations thus far, and we're continuing to use it on the isolated infestations. As wonderful a tool as it is, and it is a wonderful tool, there are supply limitations. It would take over 100 million of those things to do the entire area. If that supply doesn't exist, you'd have to come back in 90 days, retrieve all those, and put them back out. So operationally, this is limited to highly isolated infestations. Medium level, a somewhat greater number of moths spread over a number of contiguous square miles, typically near heavily infested areas. We propose to come in with 2 treatments. The release of native parasitic wasps. They're flying dust specks. They're less than a 25th of an inch long. Take the period on the paper in front of you. They'll comfortably fit inside it. These are commercially available native insects. They make their living by eating the insides of butterfly moth eggs. Female wasp lays her egg inside, the larva hatches and eats the egg from the inside.
And is that a good way to make a living?
I've never tried it, but you know, it works.
So at level, we've got wasps, and what's the second approach?
Well, the other one's going to be what we call male moth attractant. We'll mix a little bit of the pheromone with a carrier, in this case a clay-based material, with a little bit of the insecticide permethrin. It's a commonly used homeowner insecticide. It's used to impregnate clothing when you go to the tropics to protect you from biting insects that spread disease. It can be used in your homes, used for lice control, used in hospitals, used in restaurants.
And then for high?
We'll apply that to areas, small amounts onto street trees and utility poles at a rate of about 3,000 spots per square mile from a moving vehicle. High areas will be using both the parasitic wasps and male moth attractant to knock the population down in anticipation of the aerial spray. We're currently evaluating 4 different carriers, that is, materials that will carry the pheromone on. The goal is to have something that will last effectively for at least 90 days to reduce the number of times we have to spray. This is not a one-size-fits-all, that's the quickie. All the materials we are using have been reviewed for human health impacts and environmental impacts by US EPA, California Department of Pesticide Regulation, OEHA Public Health. There's environmental assessments that have been produced by the US Department of Agriculture. Those have been put out for public comment. All that happened before we had any of the materials in use. Those reviews continue. Any new materials that are projected for use this year will undergo that same scrutiny. None of those reviews found any reason to believe that the materials, as we are using them at the rates we are using them, would be linked to human health effects. In addition, we have in fact monitored the human health comments that have come in. All those comments, whether self-reported, whether online that we can lay our hands on, whether reported through the pesticide illness reporting system, have been sent to the Departments of Public Health and OEHA for review. Those reviews are still pending. I've been told those should be done by about the end of the month, early next month.
Let me just interrupt you and try and ask a closing question before we move on to the folks who are going to provide some commentary on agricultural considerations. That is, with respect to hearing from members of the public after the spray. So we've had areas that have been sprayed. Some of them are in my district, as you know. We've had people who have then expressed concerns about health impacts that they've experienced. How do they get heard, and what response to their concerns are you able to provide? Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Practical, sort of simple nuts and bolts.
The practical nuts and bolts, those people who went to their physicians and their physicians filed a suspected pesticide illness report, went through the appropriate system. It does not include the Department of Food and Agriculture. There's people from DPR here who can describe that. Those have all been investigated. I understand there's about 40 of those. There were, I understand, in excess of 600 self-reported illness reports. Those have been turned over to OEHA, Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and the Department of Public Health. Those are the agencies that are responsible for investigating those. They have investigated those. They are keeping us appraised of the results of those investigations. To date, they have not found any link between our activities and those illnesses, and they can speak to that.
Okay, let's just pause right there. Again, let's ask everybody to keep a lid on, please. So, just so we're clear, we have a system that allows physicians to report, and we have a system that allows for self-reporting. That information is then shared with a group of folks who we hope have professional expertise in the field, and then they share their assessment with you. Is that correct so far?
Slight modification, the physicians have a legal obligation to report.
Great, thank you. And then when they share that information with you, does that affect your decision about whether or not you're going to go forward with additional spraying?
Yes, the Secretary has said in many occasions that we've done in the past, if someone comes in and shows us a clearly identifiable link from these organizations with our activities, projected or actual, we'll stop.
Okay. Now, if there were 640, roughly, that have been received, processed, and evaluated, and that evaluation has been shared with you, does that mean that the assessment has been made that the 640 folks who weighed in, if they had ailments, those ailments were not connected with the spray?
That is what we're hearing from OEHA and Public Health.
Okay, now, before we get to the next place on the agenda, this is a place where I think it would be useful to say, do we have those folks who are here from OEHA and from Public Health?
Yes.
Could we ask them to step forward? Because rather obviously, if you get 640 people who think that there was some adverse health impact, and they reported it, presumably there are others who may or may not have made the connection, but that's just the number that's reported. Then the obvious question is, are we going to be able to go back to those 640 folks and say, whatever happened, we don't think it had anything to do with aerial spraying? And thank you for being here. Could we ask you to identify yourselves?
And is there anybody here that felt that they were exposed and wants to give an oral testimony about their experience?
Go right ahead.
I'm Sam Delson, Deputy Director of OEHA, and I have with me Dr. David Ting, one of our toxicologists.
Thank you both.
We've been reviewing the illness reports from last fall and are in the process of finalizing a report that will be out by the end of the month. We hope to have an internal draft circulating by the end of the week. And to date, we found that there were 74 illness complaints reported to physicians. There were 44 cases in which physicians filed pesticide illness reports to the state. And we are analyzing those reports and have not drawn conclusions. However, based on the toxicity of the pheromone application that was sprayed and the levels of exposure, we believe the level of exposure was likely too low to have caused human health effects.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to make sure I just understood something you said. I thought I heard you say that even though you hadn't actually had an opportunity to fully evaluate the complaints, that you had already reached a conclusion based solely on the data that you have about the product concentrations. Did I understand that correctly?
No.
Thank you. Let's try it again.
Just to clarify, we have not drawn a final conclusion based on what we have known of the material that was used and the way it was used. The expectation is that it would be unlikely to cause human health effects, but we have not drawn. We are analyzing the specific reports, and we take every report seriously. Human health and safety is our top concern and priority, and we don't know exactly what accounted for them, but we're still analyzing them.
And how long will, I want to get to Senator Migden just a minute, but how long will it take, do you think, to evaluate those complaints?
We expect to have our report out by the end of the month. However, it's not certain whether that report will be able to draw a conclusion on the cause of the complaints. It will state what we found, what we've analyzed, the information available, and we hope to draw conclusions, but that's not certain.
And Secretary Carver, are we suspending any spray until we have the benefit of those analyses?
The current scheduling for spraying will be into June or July at this point. So we're, again, waiting and listening to the science, as we always do.
And is it fair to say that if you got some indication that there was a health risk here, that would affect your plans for the spring?
Yes.
Let me go to Ms. Migden now and see if she has...
I mean, what the Secretary's saying is we don't think they're related, those complaints, which sounds like they're a little hysterical or psychosomatic or something suspected. you're hedging and saying, gee, you don't think so, but you can't say definitively until you run them down. So what the chairman is saying, that if those complaints are not faulty, does that reporting mechanism feed into what might prevent the state from taking action, which is aerial spraying residents? And moreover, the people that have said that they are expressing health concerns were subjected to far less a dose than is planned for the subsequent spray, and that's folks in this area. Is that not the case? I mean, you think, what do you mean? Are they full of hooey, these people, or did they have respiratory problems? Yes or no?
We take the complaints very seriously. We're not questioning anyone's illness. The question is, what was the cause?
Right, but it would be funny to assume it wasn't the cause if 85 people have to be coughing. You know, and I mean, the health department said, well, something else that way. There was just a strange virus in the air, in addition to spraying. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask, and I appreciate it, to expedite this part. Maybe the further testimony could be in reaction to questions that we may raise. And we can hear from the public, raise some questions, get some answers, so we don't have this be one-sided, and everyone will have a chance to give conclusions or set us right if we're not understanding something.
All right. Before we let the folks who are at the table step away, let me just ask, is there anything else on the health impacts? Dr. Senior here, thank you very much. Is there anything else that you should be sharing with us on health impacts?
Just that we're in the process of developing a more systematic illness tracking system so that we can respond more quickly in the event that there are illness reports if there is spraying this year.
Now let me just ask that, is there an issue at all in terms of the product that's being used being bioaccumulative, given by that I mean having some longer term cumulative impact that might not be significant or a source of concern in your professional view if it was a single aerial spraying, but that might begin to develop some source of concern for you if it was every 30 days over a 3-year period for the sake of discussion?
Based on the information we have,
Dr. Ting might like to speak right into that.
Thank you.
Dr. Ting, David Ting. Based on the information we haven't seen information about the chemicals that could be cumulative in terms of staying with the body or cause other effects. Yeah.
Thank you. Made our system a little more complicated than otherwise might have been. Gentlemen, would you introduce yourselves? Let's see if we can let you get a word in here into this conversation.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Henry Hellberg. I'm the Executive Director for Marin Organic. And Marin Organic is an association of organic producers here in Marin County. And in this capacity, we are representing about 98% of all vegetable and row crop growers who possibly could be affected by this pest.
Thank you.
And with you is
Stacy Carlson, Marin County Agricultural Commissioner.
Thank you. And I'm going to try and cut to the chase on this. Mr. Helford, so what do you think about all this?
Well, I think we will convene again next year here. Maybe in regard to Light Brown Apple Moth, and maybe in regard to one of the other 800 species that our Secretary is trying to manage, or one of the many thousands that we will face in the future. The U.S. spends about $120 billion a year trying to manage and control invasive species, and this does not account for the loss of biodiversity or species extinction of natives. In addition, there's $60 billion, as we know, in the Farm Bill, and I'm not here to discuss the Farm Bill, but we are creating a scenario in which promotes an agricultural system that's based on monocropping and a lack of biodiversity, creating the perfect scenario for invasives and for pests to flourish. So, at a time when international trade is at an all-time high, we have actually cut, 20 years ago, we have started to cut border controls, and I really want to echo what Secretary Kawamura said, making his job and his life really, really tough to even deal with what's at stake right now, but with budget cuts and border control that is missing now. Yes.
Move to the issue,
Okay.
my friend, because we got,
Well,
you
it's
know,
important. Yes. It's important.
we're not saying it's not, but we've heard it, and we've got a lot of folks, and we got folks outside. So
Well, it's critical.
we're going to try and change leadership in the
Yes.
federal government. We'll elect a new president, and then maybe we'll have better controls of immigration and pest. We all agree with that. Just saying, we agree with that. Now, sir, if you could move to the second part now. We know the secretary's making a good point, and of course we agree with that. But the business at hand today, please.
Mr. Helberg, let me try and help frame the issue for you. Again, thank you for being here, and thank you for your patience. Where we are today is we've got spraying that's already occurred. We've got a proposal to go forward with additional spraying. And the questions that all three of us outlined earlier were about whether or not that's really going to be necessary, whether it's going to be effective, whether or not there are other alternatives, and whether or not it's safe. So if we can focus on those questions today, I think it will help make the whole presentation a little more crisp.
Yes, I do want to take 10 seconds anyway, because we are a society that is completely based on a temporary fix, and we don't look at the underlying causes of anything, not in our healthcare system and not in this issue. And it's important to state that, and I will take these 20 seconds. So thank you for letting me say that. In regard to this pest, we are very concerned about the possible economic damage that it may cause. And of course, we see the need to combat pests, but we are in full support of the Marine Agriculture Commissioner Stacey Carlson's proposal, which will follow my presentation of a ground-based means, which is really based on strengthening the existing eco-balance through intercropping, mechanical means, and such. And really throughout California, we don't see that. They are specific to Light Brown Apple Moth, now beneficial plants known that attract predators. So the approach that is suggested does not include the whole entire holistic system that could be put on this pest or any pest following. So we are absolutely supporting ecological balance, strengthening the ecosystem, mechanical means, and then as an absolutely last resort, organically allowed materials, and really looking at how they are applied as well. And aerial application, I'm also a holistic nutritionist, and you talked about the bioaccumulation of materials in the environment, and there's no, it doesn't sound to me any better to have a material that release over 90 days than 30. There's no real win for human health and concerns of our citizens. And the cocktail effect of multiple ingredients combined, how we are exposed to them on a daily basis. So at this point, Marine Organic is rejecting and opposing the proposed aerial application. And we think we have a good track record of working here with our Agriculture Commissioner and trying in non-toxic means ground application and really giving it enough attention and time to see if that can work.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Look, you know, this is not hard. We're going to listen to the folks who speak, and we're going to then let other folks be listened to when they speak. And we'll just try to keep it this way. And we're getting close to a point where I'd have to ask Sergeant Arms to ask folks to step outside the chambers, and I don't want to do that. Mr. Helberg, excuse me, let me just add. So the summary is, it would be nice if we took a broader, more holistic view in your judgment. You have concerns about the spray. You think there are some other ground-based applications that we ought to be looking at. And you're concerned about not only the active ingredient in terms of the pheromone, but the other things that are in any spray that's applied. Do I have that right?
I would restate the nice. I think it's essential that we have a holistic approach. It's not nice. I think it's essential to combat any pest, this one and future. Basically, yes, you got the gist.
Great. Then let's go to Mr. Carlson and say, Mr. Carlson, what, if anything, would you like to add to that view?
Well, I see things through different lenses in my position as Agricultural Commissioner, and I feel there's a great risk to our organic farming, who Helgi represents as an executive director. The real issues of having a quarantine established in our agricultural area. that elicits a lot of impacts to our farmers in terms of day-to-day practices, increased costs, and possibly even increased use of pesticides that are known not to be pheromones or be considered more hazardous.
Okay.
And if I may, I would like to just run through about 5-6 slides if that's appropriate.
You can do that briskly, that'll be
I
fine.
can do that quickly. I just want to point out, this is a picture of Marin County. You get the lay of the land. We've caught 95 moths to date. Primarily, many of them are in the southern part, but we have some up in the northern part. You see them in red. They're hard to see, but I just want to point out that we do have a relatively light infestation, but at the same time, we have a window of opportunity to address this problem, in addition to waiting for aerial treatments, if any, were to occur. The next slide. We've got many people working on this, and this isn't new, but I wanted to point out that we have the threat of quarantines, and I want you'll see this reflected throughout my presentation. Next slide. To me, we should start working on eradication today. We have 5 months to work on this. We need to prevent movement into Sonoma and Napa or into our own agricultural area. Next slide. I propose that, as soon as possible, we look at using twist ties. We have this current area that's being twist tied, and I have dark circles around outlying populations where I think we should be implementing those projects right now, simply because they're near the West Marin agricultural vegetable crop area. We need to move on that. Next slide. I have these in green. It's a little hard here, but I think this pheromone attractant, including twist ties, could be useful in the Belvedere, Tiburon area, and take a look at that. In addition, move forward with that even as we have time on our hands. Next slide. I think the Angel Island infestation is not practical to use certain tools. I think aerial treatment might be appropriate. Low population out there, low risk, and the topography issue is a problem. Including the open space areas over Tiburon, there may be some opportunities if that were to occur with the woodlands. Next slide. Currently, fiscal impacts in Marin County. This is not projected, these are current. We have about $242,000 worth of quarantine impacts, and you can see the various types of pests that we have to deal with, including Light Brown Apple Moth. Next slide. Potential effects, mentioned and have stated this before, but quarantines are across the board. Our nurseries, our farmers, they affect our farmers market, our landscape maintenance folks, and we have some environmental issues, I fear, for not controlling this pest. Next slide. I think here's my biggest concern. Currently, Marin County is reported to use 60,000 pounds of pesticides. Urban area is 55,000 pounds, and these are not pheromones, folks. These are real pesticides that are applied in landscape, structural pest control. Agriculture's share is very small, so we want to keep it that way. But it's uncertain, what happens with the retail level if homeowners take advantage of this and start using chemicals as well. Increase our surface water impacts, which are a big problem we have right now. We're trying to take care of them. So I'm not happy about the potential for pesticides.
So we can hear from Dr. James Carey, Dr. Daniel Harder, who have some state of the science information to share with us. Appreciate their patience and their willingness to be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My presentation is about 8 or 9 minutes. I am James Carey, entomologist at UC Davis with specialties in invasion biology, insectomography, and population dynamics. I served on the CDFA Medfly Scientific Advisory Panel from 1987 to 94, and also testified on the Medfly crisis in the state to the California Legislature Committee on the Whole 17 years ago. I've been an entomologist for 35 years, and I've been at UC Davis for 28 years. The question regarding the LBAM invasion is not whether we want to eradicate it. Of course we do. Rather, the question is whether it's possible to actually eradicate. Although I'm not speaking for anyone other than myself, I've talked to 8 different UC entomologists about the LBAM problem Some of them are highly statured scientists within the UC system. Not one of these entomologists believes that the light brown apple moth can be eradicated. Not one. But the voices of those and virtually all other entomologists in the state are conspicuous by their absence, so they are reluctant to speak out because many are either beholden to CDFA, USDA, or industry for funding, or they believe that supporting the ag industry means supporting CDFA's decisions. Given the extent of the LBAM infestation in the state and the lack of control tools, I seriously doubt that there is any entomologist in the country who believes that eradicating this pest is possible at this stage. I'd like to first offer my scientific views of the LBAM problem and then make specific suggestions for actions for both the short and the long term. The current distribution of LBAM in California covers 10 counties with a combined area of more than 8,000 to 10,000 square miles. It's about the size of Connecticut. It suggests that this pest is not a recent introduction, but has been in the state for perhaps 30 to 50 years. For perspective, the gypsy moth took more than 10 years to spread from the point of introduction to the next door neighbor's place, and over 30 years to spread to 3 counties in Massachusetts. The argument that LBAM is a recent invader because no populations were detected by CDFA in 2005 cannot be reconciled with LBAM's current widespread distribution. This recent invader hypothesis is simply not credible. For the recent invader argument to be valid, the assumption would have to be made that the pest is capable of spreading 4,000 to 8,000 square miles annually, or alternately from 50 to 100 miles outward per year. There's no precedent for this rate of spread for any insect, not even close. For perspective, I have handouts, or slide 2 in the handout. I plotted the spread of the gypsy moth on the East Coast and used it as a frame of reference for the LBAM spread. Note that for this pest, they know when it was introduced in 1869, required at least 40 years to spread the 10,000 square miles from 1870 to 1910. Thus, using the gypsy moth as a model, I back projected the current LBAM distribution to a starting point 40 years ago. Although the LBAM is not the gypsy moth, this is how science is done. Use the rates of another species to approximate one you are interested in, then you can adjust it up or down or whatnot. But you don't simply make up numbers. You cannot simply do science by assertion. You should be asked to present to your committee both a scientific paper and a credible model of spread that would stand up to peer review in a scientific journal. Likewise, the model of LBAM population growth contained in a declaration by CDFA that was signed by Kevin Huffman not just lacked credibility, it's demographically incredulous. I published 3 books on demography, including one on insect demography, and an associate editor on several journals. And this would not stand up to any editor of entomology or an ecology journal. The LBAM, CDFA has LBAM growing at demographic speed of light, with one moth producing 2 trillion thousand. This is the actual number they use in 5 generations. This is equivalent to 50 moths per square inch in Berkeley. So using actual data from the journal Animal Ecology, my estimates would be a growth of about 50 to 100 moths. These don't grow like bacteria. Once again, you need a scientific paper of a population that grows at this rate. It can't possibly be the rate that CDFA has presented. Now, the history of eradication programs in which an exotic insect is as widespread as LBAM in California suggests that we have virtually no chance of success because several preconditions for conducting a successful eradication program are unmet. First, an effective eradication tool. This mating disruption pheromone is a control tool. It's not an eradication tool. There are huge problems even with the use as a control tool. Never in the history of insect eradication has a pheromone ever been used for eradication program, much less been successful in eradicating insect population. Second, a monitoring system for delineating the full extent of the infestation at the beginning of the program as well as at advanced stages. And then also you need strong public support so that ground crews can get in and have full access. Even under the best of circumstances, eradication is difficult to achieve for the same reason that advanced metastatic cancer are difficult to cure. That is, there's not one LBAM population, but tens of thousands, infesting backyards, parks, fields, and so forth. In other words, every shrub is a potential population. So anything short of 100% effectiveness for each of these population pockets is really considered control and not eradication. Okay? Here's my recommendations. First, do a reality check. This pest is so widespread that control and monitoring tools so ineffective and public support in urban areas so weak that eradication is simply not an option. You can't eradicate this. Second, stop considering exotic pest situations as dichotomous, that is, either eradicate or manage. In fact, there are a number of intermediate concepts, including containment. Thus, we should be considering creating a first-rate program of containment of the LBAM rather than launching an eradication program that really has no chance of success. Could be modeled after the slow the spread program, the gypsy moth back east. Also, the concept of what they call moth-free zones. They use it in fruit fly-free zones where you have a low risk based on monitoring protocols and so forth. You can ship commodities. Thirdly, revisit trade policies. Right now, the biologists and entomologists, the CDFA and USDA, have to shoulder the lion's share of the burden for dealing with the pest. Just as some mountains can't be moved and some cancers can't be cured, many pests simply cannot be eradicated. You need to revisit trade policy here. Fourthly, get the University of California involved. You need a degree of scientific independence here. It's a research arm of the state. There's not just have token entomologists on panels, but you need, as a technology advice, but you need independent advice. And so there's 150 ecologists just at Davis. There's probably 1,000 or 1,200 ecologists in the UC system. And lastly, a recommendation is, and of course this is long term, but we need to create a discipline in what I call invasion science. That is where you have a coherency of the exclusion, of the monitoring, of the invasion biology principles and so forth. It's simply sort of ad hoc right now, and there needs to be brought together. I think California could be a leader in creating that. And I'll just close that, you know, I've been away from invasion biology for about 10 years. I do aging research right now. I can see the LBAM problem with fresh eyes, as well as having the perspective of having served on the CDFA panel for 7 or 8 years. Broadly speaking, virtually nothing operationally has changed. The only things that have changed is emergencies are more frequent. The pests that the state are dealing with for 20 years or more are more entrenched and widespread. It's clearly time to take a hard look at our approach to exotic pests in the state. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, we're not going to do that, folks.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to speak to this panel. My interest in LBAM, and I'm speaking on my own, but as director of the UC Santa Cruz Arboretum, I maintain a very valuable state asset. And when I initially learned of the light brown apple moth invasion, I've been attuned to invasions of pests, including weeds and insects, because of their impact on our collection. And what I was hearing from CDFA was...
Dr. Daniel Harder, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, this is Dr. Daniel Harder, thank you. My interest in protecting that collection long term. And when I read the reports from CDFA about the threat to my collection, the Arboretum enjoys decades-long relationships with New Zealand and Australia because we have large collections of those plants at the Arboretum. And I simply started emailing people about the light brown apple moth. That turned into phone calls. And then Jeff Rosendale and I initiated a trip to New Zealand to see firsthand what the damage LBAM causes to native forests and in agriculture. This is not my research, the report that I produced. It's not my research, it's a factual report of its findings being reported to us by New Zealand scientists and experts. LBAM has been in New Zealand for more than 100 years. It's also been established in the UK, Hawaii, and it's a native of Australia. LBAM was a problem pest in the 1980s when broad-spectrum organophosphate insecticides were used. Not only did these pesticides kill LBAM, but also killed any predatory beneficial insects that might eat and control LBAM. Once OPs were eliminated, organophosphates were eliminated because of health concerns, populations of beneficial insects that eat LBAM came back and reestablished themselves. Today in New Zealand, light brown apple moth is controlled at 80–90% by native and other kinds of insects and organisms that eat it. LBAM does not pose a threat to native forests in New Zealand, never has, or to agriculture, except within agriculture as it relates to meet the U.S. zero tolerance quarantine
Do you have
report.
those insects?
Sure. I'm sorry?
Do you have the comparable insects that would eat moth?
I sure do. Not only are these co-evolved trichogramid wasps, which the CDFA is proposing on releasing to control this, but it's organisms like birds, spiders, earwigs, beetles, assassin beetles, mayflies, a variety of different kinds of organisms. New Zealand has developed exceptional integrated pest management strategies using pheromone-baited traps for monitoring and very judicious use of insect growth regulators based on monitoring results alone. Often LBAM is not even sprayed for, as other treatments are effective. And this is in saying that we were told in New Zealand that any other treatment for any other insect will control LBAM as well. So oftentimes New Zealand farmers don't even treat for LBAM, nor are concerned about its impact. And for reference, in California, there has been no reported quantifiable damage from LBAM. These model control mechanisms developed in New Zealand can readily be adopted for use in California agriculture to produce LBAM-free produce for export. So Canada and Mexico's impositions of quarantine can easily be mitigated by integrating these New Zealand techniques for LBAM-free produce going to these countries. So these restrictions shouldn't even be in place. New Zealand has never applied pheromones aerially, except this particular year where they're testing the longevity of the pheromone in the environment, and never over urban populations of people. Techniques proposed by CDFA have not been tested, so it constitutes a grand experiment involving 17 million people and 7,000 square miles. Natural predators to similar moths in the leaf roller family already are in California. There are 85, for instance, for reference, there are over 85 species of tortricid moth, leaf roller family moth, in California, and as been indicated, birds, earwigs, wasps, flies, lacewing larvae, ants, assassin beetles, big-eyed beetles, taconid flies, even are controlling California native moths already. And as I mentioned, the Environmental Advisory Task Force presented results of an experimental design using 2 native species of trichogramma wasps, showing close affinity for eating LBAM. Eradication, or parasitizing LBAM, excuse me. Eradication will most likely not be successful. Pheromones do not kill, only modify behavior, as Dr. Carey has pointed out. LBAM needs a reevaluation as an actionable pest. This was something that was requested of us, of New Zealand also, requiring quarantine. I think Canada and Mexico will follow our lead on this, just like they followed our lead when we initially listed this insect as being something quarantinable. The use of organophosphates need to stop immediately, as this will make control of LBAM more difficult in the long term. Retail nurseries should stop using organophosphates because they kill beneficials, pollinators, anything else in the system. And if New Zealand is an example, they're harmful to the health and in the environment. And also resistance can develop in LBAM, so organophosphates will not be affected and long-term detrimental effects on the environment. Our fact-finding trip to New Zealand brought back the exact tools necessary to control LBAM effectively. The potential to spread across the United States is limited and speculative, as LBAM populations do not increase above a fairly low temperature high of 30 degrees Celsius. A nursery manager at our Arboretum has worked with the Arboretum for over 25 years, and she notes that leaf roller populations are cyclical. Some years you see more, some years you see less, and are under control by native predators, including LBAM. The Arboretum has chosen not to use organophosphates nor introduce them into the Arboretum because of health concerns and our detriment to the environment. And so we've chosen to use the less effective but longer-term Bacillus thuringiensis. Historic collections of tortricid moths can hold the key to figuring out when light brown apple moth is in the region. And I've looked at collections from the Monterey Peninsula, and there are collections of moths that look like light brown apple moth, very similar to it, from 2005. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Migden, any questions before we move on to the next phase? All right. Thank you, John. We'd ask you to stay with us. Appreciate that.